So, before we get started, I just want to quickly mention we are now going to classic regular Trek. That means no more Pike, none of the people you saw in the last episode, except for Spock. But now we got Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and all of the rest of the crew of the Enterprise. Now, without further ado, let's spend the next 10 or so minutes watching McCoy deal with his very salty ex. In episode 2, The Man Trap. The episode opens with the Enterprise in orbit of planet M113 to provide supplies and medical examinations to the only two inhabitants of the planet, Dr. Robert Crater and his wife Nancy, who is McCoy's ex. Kirk, McCoy and a crewman beam down to the surface to meet with Dr. Crater. Now, I know I said last week that captains aren't allowed to go on away missions, but there are some exceptions. A routine mission like this one, for example. So I'm going to start a counter for every time a captain goes on an away mission when they're not supposed to. This one doesn't count, but I need to add the one from last week. Once they beam down, the landing party walks straight into Dr. Crater's home. Wow, just walking in without knocking. How rude. What if he was doing something in there that none of them wanted to see? I mean, luckily he wasn't there, but still. As the landing party is looking around Crater's home, Nancy walks in on them, and while they're talking, it turns out all three men are seeing her completely differently. McCoy is seeing her how he saw her 12 years before, Kirk is seeing her as how she would actually appear, and the crewman is seeing her as some random woman he once met on a pleasure planet. And after he says this, McCoy and Kirk get so pissed off with him, they tell him to wait outside. And just as he goes outside, Nancy goes out to look for her husband. After which, Dr. Crater arrives. And when Kirk asks him what he needs, all he says is he needs additional salt tablets to battle the heat. Does this man not understand how heat works on the human body? Maybe he shouldn't be a doctor.
Actually, you don't need to know anything about the human body to be a doctor. A scientist can be a doctor.
Yeah, but they're not real doctors, are they? Oh, someone's gonna get pissed off at me for that joke and I find it fucking hilarious. While Crater is being examined, the men hear Nancy scream outside, and when they go to investigate, they find Nancy standing over the body of the dead crewman. When asked, Nancy tells Kirk that she saw him eating a Borgia plant, which supposedly killed him. I don't think so. That crewman's not a red shirt. He must have died for a reason. Oh, fuck. Back up on the Enterprise bridge, the crew are getting on with their day-to-day tasks. Uhura gets bored at her comm station and decides to go bother Spock. Hold on. In a society where everyone is supposedly equal, they still have a black woman answering the space telephone. And yes, I did steal that joke from Big Bang Theory. Don't at me. After Uhura tries, and fails, to flirt with Spock, the bridge receives a communication informing them of the crewman's death, to which Spock responds, "Bridge acknowledging." Uhura gets completely disgusted by this and says to Spock,
Somebody's dead and you just sit there?
Yeah, Uhura, he's Vulcan. He doesn't need to feel. Spock informs the captain and the doctor that the Borgia plant is extremely similar to nightshade and that any poisoning would have similar effects. Except, I don't think nightshade poisoning causes your face to look like that. Which, of course, McCoy comes to the same conclusion that he wasn't poisoned. Later, McCoy finds out that the crewman's dead body has been completely drained of all salt. And once finding this out, what does Kirk decide to do? Lead a landing party down to the surface to question Crater. That's two. When questioning Crater, Kirk says, "We're all aware of the need for salt on a hot and arid planet like this." Again, surely water would be more of a valuable resource on a hot planet like that than salt would. Do these people not understand that dehydration would be a major problem and salt leads to dehydration? When Crater runs off, Kirk and McCoy go to look for him but come across another dead crewman with the exact same marks as the one from before. The creature, just having killed another crewman, decides to change its form into that crewman, to then meet up with Kirk and McCoy. When McCoy says he needs to go look for Nancy, Kirk says to him, "You could learn something from Mr. Spock, Doctor, and stop thinking with your glands." Now, is that the 60s version of stop thinking with your dick? Because if it is, I like it and I'm going to start using it. The creature, now disguised as Crewman Green, beams aboard the Enterprise with Kirk and McCoy. Now, with all the equipment in the transporters, surely they would have picked up a non-human life form. I mean, yes, I know it's able to change shape, but it still can't change its internal biology. While wandering around the ship, the creature comes across a yeoman who is eating what looks like celery off of a tray. She then starts to salt the celery. Who the hell puts salt on an uncooked vegetable? It's fucking madness. And of course, because of the salt, the creature starts following her around. And while the creature is following around this yeoman, some other crewmen start ogling the yeoman and saying stuff like, "Oh, you know what I do to her?" Doesn't matter what century you're in, men are always fucking disgusting. Just wait for the incel comments. We're not all men. Anyway. Okay. So, this yeoman is bringing this tray of food to Sulu. But when we first saw her, she was eating the food. That's fucking rude. It's like if you're at a restaurant and the waiter comes over and goes, "Here you go, here's your steak, I've eaten about half of it." It's like, what the fuck? The creature follows the yeoman into the room to grab the salt, but when it does, this plant, which is definitely not a human hand, starts to scream at the creature until it leaves. God, I wish I could do that. Just, anyone annoying, you just go, "Ah, ah." Fucking hilarious. After briefly being really creepy around Uhura, the creature changes into the form of Nancy and goes into McCoy's quarters. McCoy, of course, doesn't question how she got onto the ship or why she's wandering around without an escort. This man will not stop thinking with his dick. Sorry, his glands. Kirk again heads down to the surface, that's 3, to confront Crater about the creature that is killing his men. Once on the surface, Kirk and Spock discover the body of crewman Green and realise the creature is now aboard the Enterprise. After this, Kirk and Spock get into a shootout with Crater. Kirk tells Spock to put his phaser on stun because Crater is only trying to frighten them. He literally just admitted he's willing to kill you. After subduing Crater and finding out that Nancy is actually dead, Kirk and Spock, along with Crater, hightail it to the Enterprise to look for the creature. Soon after, they realise the creature is masquerading as McCoy once it kills Crater. After chasing it back to McCoy's quarters, Kirk tries to lure the creature away by using salt, and McCoy, not knowing what's going on, attacks Kirk. Attacking a captain. That is a court-martial offence. McCoy should be in prison. So when the creature goes to kill Kirk, McCoy doesn't do anything to stop it. He's even actively trying to stop Spock from killing it. McCoy! Stop thinking with your fucking glands! I mean dick! I mean glands! Shit! Once McCoy realises that it's not Nancy, he shoots it, killing it in the process. But as Dr. Crater repeatedly said earlier, it's the last of its kind. So McCoy just killed the last known living member of a species that they barely knew anything about. McCoy just committed genocide. Pass it on. And that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Also, don't forget to follow my TikTok, Twitch and Instagram, linked below in the description. I'll see you all in the next one. Live long and prosper.